Today on the Following Films podcast, I'm joined by cinematographer Martin Ruhe. Martin's latest film, The Amateur, is a tense, grounded thriller. We spend a lot of time talking about how he helped shape its unique look and feel. We also get into his earlier work, like the beautifully shot Control, and how his collaborations with George Clooney kicked off with The American, and later continued with The Tender Bar. It was a real pleasure having Martin break down his process, how he approaches working with directors. Now he keeps pushing himself creatively from project to project. Hope you enjoy the show. Thanks. What attracted you to this project initially?
Well, I think it's, first of all, the story, the script. I got the script a while ago, and then I found it fascinating because it is such a different take on action. It's a different take on revenge movies, and it's smart and it defies expectations. That's what I loved about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a, while I could never be this character. I do not have this set of skills that he has to do this type of work and intelligence. It is something that feels far more relatable than your average action revenge thriller type film, where this is somebody that is really pushed into this and uses his skill set that he has to find a different way of seeking revenge. And it's something that feels utterly grounded despite how heightened it is.
True. That's what we try to do as well. We try to keep it grounded and not to do, a lot of movies are so over stylized and so action is so unrealistic that get bored by it because it doesn't really matter because you feel nothing's going to ever happen for real.
Well, you think about the moments that you allow for quiet in this, that there's a moment that these two scenes that are just right next to each other where it kind of stops and they're at this waterfront home for a moment, and you really have this internalization between these two characters that's followed up by one of the most intense scenes in the film. And it's not something that you can really capture in a trailer. It's not something that you can, where they're just trying to get away in this moment and they're running. And it's the two scenes are so wildly different, but really I think it just encompasses the whole film in about 7 or 8 minutes between those two moments. But you really do give the characters room to breathe in this film. I was wondering if when you're designing moments like that and thinking about how to bring that sense of peace and then really just that sort of those internal moments and then back them up right next to something that is so visceral and just where I almost forget to breathe for a few moments while they're in that car chase.
I think it's always important, especially if you do action, to think of rhythm. So you need to allow the moment, and then you also want to change the pace all of a sudden. And then I think it's that gets you excited because it surprises you, and then it surprises me. But I feel like you have to allow that. You have to give things the space they need, and then interrupt the rhythm, and then break it, and then and all of a sudden, one moment it's very quiet, the camera is with them, and then takes its time, and then all of a sudden we are as excited as they are. The camera moves very different. We are very much on speed, and then we have aerial shots, we have drones going by, we have all of a sudden this threat which could come from anywhere, and then that's what we try to do, change the pace. All of a sudden it was really fast, and then he's on his own again. All of a sudden he's she dies, and then this moment of sadness when he leaves her behind in the car. It's the shock of that, but you don't have the time to react to it. You get that in the moment when he's in the parking lot and then leaves the car behind, and he's tended to her, and we take time there again.
Well, and the way that you have these frenetic moments in the film, something like in the club or something along those lines where it can be confusing at times, but that feels like it's by design, where there is a very solid sense of geography throughout when you have action scenes. And that's something that's really important to me personally, to know where I am in the world, to have an idea of how you get out of this moment. And where are the back doors and those things. And I feel like when your character is lost, that's when the audience is lost. When who you're following is confused, those are the only moments when you really lose that geography, if that makes sense.
It makes sense, and for us, it was always important to be with him. So that's why, the first half of the film, when until he goes to the farm, until he starts his training, everything
Hmm.
is composed. It's cameras on dollies. We have crane shots. But everything is calm. But when he starts to take action, when he starts to, engage, all of a sudden, not sudden, but slowly, we shift to handheld cameras. We shift to motion, and we constantly on the move with him.
And then is that something that you're conscious of editing and talking about that with the director as you're shooting, or is it something where you're doing longer takes that are being cut down for those moments?
I think on this film, because I think we had 60 days, our set list, we had 140 sets and or something like that. So there was not much
No.
uh, time to play around. So we had to shoot quite a lot of things fairly quick. So we were trying to be quite efficient with it. Um, we talked about rhythm. We talked about what that moment is, what the next moment is. I was very often present for rehearsals to see that and then decide with James together how we would approach this.
And
Yeah.
then that's 60 days is surprising, considering I don't know how much of this is film trickery, but this does feel like a movie that is literally shot all over the world. It feels like you're changing. I don't know how many locations and moves you actually had, but it definitely feels like you're really seeing quite different
Mm.
landscapes throughout the film.
We wanted to shoot. There was another complication with this shoot because we started shooting in spring of 23, and then we got stopped down by the actors strike. So
Right.
when we came back, we started shooting again. We were down for 4 months. Then when we started again, we all of a sudden had to shoot in December, but we had prepped everything in March, April. So we started shooting and when we're in high summer. So all of a sudden, and we started shooting in the UK and had to go. We were planning to go to Riga for the Russian part,
Hmm.
which then became way too cold. We couldn't do the open water sequence there, so we had to reshuffle. We did the open water sequence in near Marseille and but the Russian harbor on land and the Russian hotel, that's all shot in Istanbul. So we had to reshuffle. Lost some locations. All of a sudden we had to shoot. We were planning to shoot a French apartment interior, but
Hmm.
we had lost the location. So we built that in the studio and shot that before we went to France. And that's when he's, you know, tricking the lock and opening
Hmm.
that to get
Yeah.
into. That is the staircase is in France, the interior is in London, and we had to improvise quite a lot. So not only that, we had to shoot a lot in a short time, but we all of a sudden we were like, okay, this is can't be Riga anymore. It has to be somewhere else. What do we do? Do we do it here, there, and then to prep in 3 countries is with a lot of locations is also tricky. But I think it worked out well. We was a good sport. Was a good training.
What would be the thing that you took away from this that you'll take into the next picture?
Uh, um, I mean, I this was a really great project because of the talent involved. All these all these actors, these fantastic actors, um, and that was mind-boggling. I think we had almost. I come from music videos. I did a lot of music videos
Yeah.
in my beginning, and then I did a lot of commercials. So um, this sometimes felt a little bit like we had to do a lot of run and gun, and then that took me back to the old days where you do something and you just see how you get away with things, and then you
Mm.
trust your impulses more and your instincts, and that was really a good thing. I liked doing that. It felt back like going back in time a little bit.
And then it was, I'm assuming, was it the music video work that ended up leading to Control? Is that how you ended up with that film?
Yes, yes, I did Control because um, there's a German singer called Herbert Grönemeyer. I'm not sure if you know
I'm
him.
not familiar with him.
He's a composer. He also did the soundtrack for The American, and he's a
Oh, yeah.
songwriter. And he used to be really good friends with, or he's very good friend with Anton Corbijn.
Okay. Okay.
And
Yeah.
they were neighbors, and so I had shot a lot of music videos for Herbert, and he introduced us. And then the next thing we did, I did a music video for Anton, and for 6 or 7 years I shot everything for Anton.
That makes perfect sense. And
Yeah.
to see something like The American, I can see that leading to the amateur and sort of that connective tissue. But honestly, that more guerrilla style that you would have in music video, that does actually make sense that that could be a natural transition there as well, because they are there. It does. I can see that connective tissue in a way I wouldn't have initially thought of.
Well, I think what we knew, because you start very well composed. So all the CI sets, that was London locations
Mhm.
modified by a production designer. So, but we knew that once we go on the road, we some places we wouldn't have much control. You can't design the bridge over the Galata Bridge. You can't, so you embrace what's there, and and um, and so you find ways to make it look good with very little means, and you have to do that fairly quick because it is, yeah, I mean, it's embracing what's there and work with that. And I really like that because it gives you a freedom. And what we gain from it in the film is that we really feel that we have the locations very present. We have the village where Inquiline lives very present. We know those places, we get to know them, and we feel like we're on a journey with Hella, with Rami's character, and we don't know where it takes us. I love those films where you go on a journey and you really don't know where you end up. And then that's what I enjoyed about this.
Oh,
And
absolutely. Could not agree with you more. It's
yeah,
that the I think this is a film that's better served if you're not trying to get two steps ahead of it.
no,
There's pretty early on, as an audience member, you realize that you're in good, competent hands, and so you can give yourself over to the film and just take it for what it's presenting to you. And it's a
yeah,
far more enjoyable experience and then instead of trying to figure out what's happening next. One thing I also really appreciated about the film for something that is as globetrotting as this is, the way you establish different locations, was there an intentional decision not to establish cities and countries in a way that they had been done before? Because I feel like you establish cities in unconventional ways, but they are ways that are very identifiable, if that makes sense.
yeah. Our intention was always not to be tourists, not
Okay,
when
exactly.
so we are with Hella somewhere. So we get with Hella into those places, and he's on the run, so he's hiding, so he's not gonna go to the Eiffel Tower, or to the Blue Mosque or something like that. He wouldn't do that. That doesn't make sense. So he has targets. He wants to go somewhere, and we are there on an emotional journey. He's like, yes, he's excited, but when he goes to London, he goes back to the place where Sarah dies, and
Yeah.
and takes that in, and I think that's what we wanted to do. So,
It's
um,
pretty remarkable to see the performances in this because this is one of those films that I think performance is first, and it's absolutely the highlight of this film to me. That you could almost see this even more stripped down
yeah,
to something while it does have spectacle and big action sequences and there's memorable stuff here. I don't think that's the reason I'll revisit this film. It really is the emotional arc of these characters and it's not just Rami's character at the center. There's several character arcs throughout this, and nobody feels one dimensional. Everybody feels like a fully realized character. Even the darkest villain, they have more nuance than you would expect in a film like this.
yeah. I like that you see that, and that was basically because of the structure of the film, becomes a road movie. So every actor who comes in as almost a guest, stays with us for a week or 2 weeks. So we had these intense moments, intense encounters between these guys, and that was fascinating. And then I think also, at the same time, Rami's character is on a journey. So when he goes to the last one, you would expect him to kill him somehow, but then he doesn't, because he's like, his journey ends there and he feels like complete by not doing that. And then he tricks him into that thing, which surprised me when I read the screenplay. But I was like, that's really smart that he doesn't do that, that he doesn't walk away. And I really enjoyed that. And then it's also great because if you have these great actors, you don't want to do too much camera trickery.
Hmm.
You let be, and you're in those intense moments, and that was just a joy to be there.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned the sort of the ending piece of that, and it's almost a little bit. We've all been trained to have a certain in revenge movies specifically. There is a, for lack of a better word, like a wish fulfillment. This thing that you're expecting to happen at the end,
Yeah.
and when that is subverted, oftentimes it can feel like a letdown. And in fact, when it's subverted here, it's not a letdown. It's actually a much more it feels more satisfying and
Mm.
feels appropriate. It's the ending that was earned in this film, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Because if it would have done the thing that if I were writing this, that I probably would have leaned into, which would have been a much cheaper ending. And I think this is a much smarter,
Mm.
interesting ending that feels honest to who this character is. And in fact, the moments where he starts to get better at what he does here is when it starts to feel like he's losing himself more,
Mm.
and then you can feel him moving away from who he was in this process, and then you can feel him sort of regaining his self in that moment, I think.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I like that. And then, you know, by the way, shooting on those ships, that was probably the most nerve-wracking day.
How so?
Because, when we had a tuna trawler and we shot outside of Marseille on the open water, and it was
Hmm.
pretty, this pretty rough. We had high waves. We had a camera on we had a camera on the ship where Hella is. The interior of the deck is a studio set, but then him getting on board and the police appearing. We wanted to shoot that at the last light of day, so it's dark, but you see still the waves, and then you see the other boats appearing all of a sudden. We had a camera on the other big boat. We had a camera on one of the dinghies. We had the camera on our boat, and we had a helicopter which had a camera on and the spotlight on. So in camera in the shot, it's the helicopter which is filming at the same time as he's acting as a police helicopter. And to coordinate that and to have that ready for just those 10 minutes in which you need to get it, that was nerve-wracking. So we had on my ship, we had all cameras, all monitors, all everything wireless connected. We had the action rehearsed during the day. We didn't do a rehearsal day or something. We had the action pre in daylight. Then we knew what to do. And at the time we started shooting, then all of a sudden the video connection didn't work. We couldn't quite see what the others were doing, and we were calling shots, and it was mayhem. But it was like we got it in this one half hour we had for this, from starting of dusk to total darkness. We got two free good takes with all perspectives working, but it was a bit nerve-wracking.
Is that one of those things where you start to question yourself in that moment of putting this on the open water with that window of time of when you have to get that light exactly right in that 10-minute window, and with all these moving pieces, you're basically, there's so many things that could go wrong in that, and you really only have that one chance to get this right. Or I don't know how many setups you were trying to do in that time period, but it doesn't seem like you would have a lot of wiggle room in there.
No, you have no wiggle room, but I think at the same time, what's the alternative? The alternative is to do a fake day for night, that doesn't look good.
No.
If you put a lot of lighting the water at night, that becomes fake as well. So you try to get it right and you try to work within your limits, but it's exciting, and if it works, you're really, at the moment you don't have time to think about it. You're just, okay, now this has to happen, now this, now this, now this, and you plow through. But and then you like you're waiting for dailies, waiting for the editing room to tell you, oh God, we're missing this, or oh, it worked.
So wait, you shot this on film?
No, no.
Oh, okay,
That
okay, okay.
We didn't do this. This was all digital, but we it's not because of that. The reaction is the same, because if the editing room says, "Oh, you missed that piece,
Got it.
could you not
Okay.
shoot this?" And then you might think, "Oh my God, obviously we should have done that, but we were too stupid or too caught up or something." That could happen easily in a moment where everything's so compressed. But it played out. We managed.
So then are you using a different camera because of the light sensitivity that you would need for a moment like that, or are you using the same rig you
No,
used for everything?
we shot everything on Alexa Mini LFs.
Okay.
We had real anamorphic lenses. The only camera different is the one in the helicopter, because I wanted to have zoom lenses on that. No, no. The cameras are pretty good. I mean, in low light, the digital cameras are pretty good. And if we had shot on film, yeah, I mean, reloading cameras, that would have, if you had to, that would have been uh, a risk to have the wrong moment where you need to reload your cameras and do that on the open water, and on the little boats which are going up and down like that. That could have been a risky thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's why it would have been when you said dailies, it just in my mind that came back waiting to see the, and that makes sense that you're waiting for the pieces being put together as opposed to waiting to see if the print looked okay.
No,
So,
no, no. Yeah, it was more that was what I was thinking of.
okay, got it. No, that makes perfect sense. I would only assume that that would just be, yeah, very few productions would do it that way. I would assume now that would shoot that way, especially for something like this with that kind of time constraint. Shooting in film would be far more difficult.
Yeah, I think I would probably throw in more camera bodies, so you have always a loaded magazine, always something. Yeah,
So, do you
but
have a preference for digital or shooting on film, or are you agnostic and it's just a tool?
I mean, I love shooting film. Always loved it. But now I feel like what I enjoy about digital is sometimes, you just you can get cameras to places where you couldn't get cameras before, because
Sure.
you have some compact systems which are so amazing already, and the way camera can move now. I mean, I having said that, the level of skill in Nosferatu is like amazing, 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 and um, I don't know. I feel like I'm open for both. I haven't shot film in a while, but I'm not sure. I'm not in the camp that I say I would never shoot film again.
Sure.
Uh, but I feel like um, I would. But sometimes I also think sometimes you see a lot of films shot on film where people go, and it becomes like a um, I don't know, like a gag. And sometimes I feel like because maybe they haven't shot that much film before, and now it's a new exciting world. And then quite often it's the imperfections which make you like film more, but
Yeah, it's the way I heard it described was sometimes it's the broken nose that makes somebody handsome. So it's
yeah,
those things that you end up falling in love with, the things that weren't perfect, that if you would have had all the time in the world and all the resources in the world, that you would have made something that would have been more polished, but it probably might not resonate as deeply. So you never know what those things are going to be, and you kind of have to accept imperfection as a part of the process, I guess.
I think so. I absolutely think so. And I feel like also yeah, it's beautiful. You watch what Chivo does, you watch what Roger Deakins does. I don't
Yeah.
miss seeing that. I don't agree with Tarantino that he says, "Oh, that doesn't have any soul." I believe that, but at the same time, what they do on film is also beautiful, but yeah, quite different.
I don't think that um, the tool that you're using to capture it is where the soul is. I think there's something in intention and design and that moment that's captured is where the soul lives. There's something that's impossible to fully describe. It's like there's a cynicism that happens in film that you can feel when things are
Mm.
made without heart. And I think that comes across more than anything. The soul lives in,
Yep.
I think, the intention of the people who are creating it, personally to me.
Beautifully said. That's why I think that's why it's also not that important which tool I
No,
use.
no, not at all. And again, it's just one of those things that if in my mind, films look a certain way, and when you change or deviate from that, that's when there's it's. I see things with anamorphic lenses. That's just kind of how I was introduced to film, and I think of it that way. But when you decide to shoot in Academy ratio, or you decide to do something like that, it almost feels like that needs to be justified instead of just doing the standard. And so, but if there's a way that you see it, there's whatever that happens to be. You know, there was a what was it? Most Violent Nature, I think was the name of the film that came out last year, where it was shot in 4:3. And my assumption about that film was they did it to make it feel more claustrophobic and that
Mm.
it gave a sense of dread and it made the woods feel much smaller. And the truth is, it was just that the filmmaker watched slasher movies in the 80s and that's what they looked like in his mind. So he made it look like it was shot on that. That's just how it looked. And it's not, that's what it was. I missed his intention, but it had a different impact to me. And I don't think that my reaction is wrong. It's just it wasn't the same as what his design was, if that
Mm.
makes sense. And those two things are can be in contrast and they don't have to be the same. And
Yeah.
if I can't, I tend to push back if I think that no film shot on digital had soul. I mean, I don't know. There's been too many. There hasn't been a soulful film made in the last 20 years. Then almost. So it's yeah. I can't agree with that. That's just me personally.
I I totally agree. I totally agree. I think that's one extreme, same as saying digital is the only thing you can use now, or I
True.
don't. Either way, I think it's wrong, and you limit yourself. But there's a fashion right now, a little bit of a fashion, a little bit of a renaissance of film, which is good and admirable. But sometimes, some films I feel like, I don't. Why? I don't know. I shot a couple of films um, on Panavision cameras, and they had such a bad video assist that you always were scared. I shot Run All Night on that, and then I was looking through the
Mm.
viewfinder, I couldn't see because a lot of the light goes through the video assist, and so I was like, God, I hope there's something there, and but. And then if I look at a digital camera and a monitor and I see, oh, this is exactly what I'm getting, then there's a relief there already. But
Well, that taking that mystery, that nervous waiting, I think is not a bad thing. There's enough reasons to have panic attacks during the making of a film. If you can eliminate one of them, go ahead and take it. To me personally,
exactly.
but
Well, on
could
the other hand, a friend of mine, director I work with on commercials, shot his first digital commercial, and he's like, he looked at the monitor and says, "That's it, the magic is gone." No surprise when you see the dailies. It was a sweet moment. I like that as well.
could you talk a little bit about, and if you don't mind, just how you ended up starting with George Clooney? Because I think he's one of the most underrated visual directors out there. I think he would be a really highly regarded director on his own
Mm.
merit. If people didn't know him as an actor, I think he's an incredible director, and his sense of visual style is he's one of the best to me personally. I think he's incredible at it. So could you just talk a little bit
Wow.
about working with him?
Yeah, that came through Anton
Okay.
Corbin. So we did after Control came out. Control changed everything for me because I had done a small German feature film, which was really not great, and the experience was terrible. So after that, I got introduced to Anton, and we did Control together, and that won a lot of awards, and caught a lot of attention. And then
And the look
uh,
of it specifically, people noticed. That was something they were always writing about was how the film looked.
yeah, and that so I also learned the last few years. I learned that they used that to teach black and white film in
Mm,
Poland, in Turkey, at the NYU. I didn't know that.
that's
It was
awesome.
nice to hear that. Um, so we had shot that film, and that caught George's and Grant Hasselhoff's attention, and they were basically looking for something for project, and they had this book, A Very Private Gentleman, which was the story for The American, and they asked Anton to do it. Anton opted, chose me to do that with him, and then we shot the film. Um, and George was in it. George was a producer on it. Grant was a producer on it. And a few years later, I mean, I'd done after that, I'd done a commercial with them, a Mercedes
Hmm.
commercial, which Grant directed, and George was in it. And then I didn't hear from them for a few years. And I think when they were getting ready for Catch 22, they uh, Bob Elswood wasn't available, and then I got a call, and I was like, "Oh, I've heard from these guys for a long time." My agents were like, "Yeah, they want would you consider this?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course, let's have." And then they were like, "We had a call," and I was like, "Okay, maybe all the usual suspects are not around, so." The fishing and but no, they offered it to me, and it was like it was very clear they wanted me to do this. And then we did Catch 22 together, and after that we started doing um we did Midnight Sky Next, we did Boys in the Boat, Tender Bar, quite a range of films we
Yeah,
did.
I was going to see the Tender Bar and the American kind of side by side. You look at the could not be more different in the way those films look or their intention. And but I mean, Tender Bar, it's such a beautiful film. I really do adore that movie. It's a great little film. So
Yeah, and so that's what I did. I also now I'm working on The Agency, which is
mhm.
produced by George, and I'm working with Grant Heslov as a director on that.
It's there's two types of films and series, television, that really they kind of like feel like the history of film to me. The first is the Western, and then the
Mm,
second is the spy film. And
yeah.
those are both things that I grew up with
Yeah.
watching with my dad. And Spy Came In From the Cold is one of my first movie memories, is watching that with my dad. And so you're kind of one of those guys now that if you're doing an espionage film, it seems like you would be pretty high on the list of the guy to go to shoot something like that.
Hope. I'll tell you in a year. No, I've been lucky. So I've been lucky that I've done a lot of really different, very different genres, very different styles, and
Yeah.
I like that also because I don't want to go get stuck with one thing. That's would be boring, and then I like to be open-minded and go into things. Um, And the thing with George, I have to say, what I realized after a couple of those films we did together, a lot of the reviews really went after him personally. So what you said just now, that his that people go after him as a person when they talk about his films, and I was like, I couldn't understand this, but yeah.
I don't understand that. And so a lot of film criticism has moved away from actually looking at the art itself and goes into the person. And that's to me irrelevant when it comes to looking at art. And I could care less about that element of it. And I just know that when I see something that's made by George Clooney, that he's directing, that he's taking the time to do something like that, it's always something that I'm interested in. It's always something that is going to have a unique point of view, that he's somebody who clearly has a deep love, and it's not something that we were talking about cynicism before. I always
Mm.
feel a sense of heart. He's made cynical films in their message that have a
Yeah.
cynical tone, but I feel his heart is 100% behind everything he does.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He doesn't do it, obviously he doesn't do it for money, but he do it for love. And then that's a weird thing that people go after him as a person, and I don't quite get it. But yeah.
Neither do
But
I.
on the other hand, like stuff like Boys in the Boat, if you look at, if you look, I mean, I don't give a shit about not I don't care too much about Rotten Tomatoes and stuff, but the audience, like there's 96% of the audience loving Boys in the
Yeah.
Boat. And critics always found something to hit him.
Yeah, there's a lot of times where I think critics are a little bit they get into groupthink sometimes where I think that the an early reaction comes out of a out of a festival or out of some early screenings, and then that becomes the narrative where too many critics, I feel like, read other critics instead of reading other things. You'd be, you'd probably be a much better critic if you never read criticism and only read other, you read novels and you read anything else but that and took your own voice and your own experiences to writing on it. Because, yeah, if you're elbow deep in Variety and trade magazines every weekend, you probably don't have a good sense of the world and maybe perhaps what the filmmaker was intending. So, at least to me, because when I see things where things are not great, but they are beloved, or things that are really, really good, solid films, and you can tell they hit the mark on what they were trying to do, and then critics will lambast it for no reason. Boys on the Boat being a perfect example, where yeah, there's an absolutely satisfying film. It's a film that I think people walked into that film and they got what they wanted out of it. It was just an uplifting film. It was a good story. You can go into all the I don't know. I don't understand that part of criticism. So even though that's a part of my world, it's something I've never been connected to. So,
Yeah.
but the Amateur is one of those rare films that I think you have really strong critical and audience reception on, where those two scores, the audience and the critic meter, they're both neck and neck with that. And that's one of the ones where you feel like, okay, it's undeniable at that point. And I think this is going to be one of those films that people discover for years to come, that, this will be something that I could very easily watch this with my 14-year-old. And if my dad was still here, I could have watched this with my dad. And, this is one of those ones that's a generational film that I think people will revisit for years to come. So congratulations. You got something special here, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to do this today. I really do appreciate it. It was great to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank
All
you,
right.
Chris.
Take care. I hope you enjoy the rest of your night. Bye-bye.
Years gone, and what do we have to show? Wasted time that I know, and fear's gone, and where did all of it go? And my pride, and my mind follows my pride. So what's wrong with fixing and plastering though? Let's not repeat the show. Spite, might, and I don't know. Left, wrong, rewind, give it a go. And my spite and my might follows my pride. So what's wrong with fixing and plastering though? Oh, nothing, oh, nothing. So sing your victory song.